The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
After 9 years of this NDP Liberal Prime Minister, costs up, taxes up, crimes up, and according to 24 Liberal MPs, time is up. This Prime Minister has doubled housing costs, doubled the national debt, given us the worst economy in the G7. He's paralyzed Parliament with a cover-up of corruption, and 2 million people are lined up at food banks, but he cannot fix what he broke because his caucus is revolting. Will he call a carbon tax election today?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, while the Leader of the Opposition is focused on politics, we're focused on delivering for Canadians the things that matter most, whether it's more money in their pockets with the Canada Carbon Rebate, more places at $10 a day childcare right across the country, dental care for seniors and more Canadians of all ages as we move forward to deliver things that are easing pressures on the pocketbooks and building a strong economy for everyone. This is the work that we're doing, that we will continue to do. While the Leader of the Opposition tosses around empty slogans and plays politics, we'll stay focused on the things that matter to Canadians.
That's right.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
24 Liberal MPs went to his caucus today to tell him that he's not worth the crime, cost, or corruption. They wanted to tell him that he's doubled housing costs, doubled the national debt, sent 2 million people to the food banks, but he wouldn't let them. He silenced half of the dissidents. In fact, some were intimidated so much so that even Rosemary Barton, the Prime Minister's favorite journalist, said people don't have phones in the room and some people are going to the bathroom texting us. Mr. Speaker, will the Prime Minister text those dissident Liberal MPs, tell them to come out of the bathroom and tell the whole world that he's not worth the cost?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, in our caucus, people have always been free to speak their mind and have different perspectives. What is interesting, Mr. Speaker, is nobody in the Conservative caucus seems to have spoken out when one of their members got an all-expenses-paid trip to an extreme anti-abortion church in Florida. Nobody spoke out. Well, one of the members on their front bench went and dined with white nationalists, far-right German nationalists, and nobody spoke up and is continuing to speak up when their leader refuses to get a security clearance so he can deal with foreign interference.
The Prime Minister liked to go grocery shopping together, Mr. Speaker. And if you had, you would know that, of course, food prices have risen 36% faster in Canada than they did in the United States during the last 4 years, and that gap grew in line with the carbon tax. The Leader of the NDP apparently likes to shop at Metro, for which his brother's company is the chief lobbyist. So maybe the Leader of the NDP can tell us, 24 Liberal MPs have lost confidence in the Prime Minister. Will the Leader of the NDP finally vote for a carbon tax election?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, there wasn't a question for the government in that, but let me reiterate that multiple analysts, economists, and the Parliamentary Budget Officer have indicated that lowering inflation has made it easier on Canadians, and the price on pollution that delivers the Canada Carbon Rebate to Canadians right across the country and puts more money in their pockets is actually helping Canadians with affordability. But if the Leader of the Opposition really wanted to help with affordability, he wouldn't have voted against dental care. Right. He wouldn't have voted against a national school food program that's saving hundreds of dollars a year to parents right across the country.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, even Liberal MPs know now, because their constituents keep telling them, that the carbon tax is driving up the cost of food. They wanted to go to caucus today and tell the Prime Minister that Canadians are literally starving, some eating out of dumpsters, because of the carbon tax. But he sent out his immigration minister to attack them, saying that they are, quote, garbage. What's garbage is the Prime Minister's record doubling housing costs, driving up food prices, and forcing people to eat out of dumpsters. Will he stop treating his own MPs and Canadians like garbage?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
I think the leader of the Conservative Party shouldn't be bragging that none of his MPs have asked him to get a security clearance so that he can actually protect his party from foreign interference. That none of his MPs have spoken out. That having one of their members go down to Florida on an all-expenses-paid trip by an extreme anti-abortion church is just fine for all of their MPs. And that, quite frankly, none of them have any issue with a member on their front bench dining with a neo-Nazi. Mr. Speaker, I would hope some of his members in his caucus would speak up about some of the problems.
And I ask the honourable member from Wellington Halton Hills to please not speak out of turn repeatedly during this question. He's an honourable and very well-respected member. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister, who has a lifelong record of racist outbursts, is now coming unglued on the floor of the House of Commons. The question was about the 24 Liberal MPs in his caucus that are trying to speak out against his quadrupling of the carbon tax, not because they care about the cost of living of their constituents, but because they're worried they're going to lose the election. So if the Prime Minister is so confident in quadrupling the carbon tax, why won't he call a carbon tax election now?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, our price on pollution not only decreases emissions and helps fight climate change, but it grows the economy and investments, and it puts more money in the pockets of middle-class Canadians from coast to coast to coast. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, what we've seen from the Parliamentary Budget Officer is that Canada Carbon Rebate puts more money back in the pockets of Canadian families than it costs them in the federal price on pollution. And that is exactly what the Leader of the Opposition wants to cut. He wants to cut affordability for Canadians. He wants to cut the fight against climate change. That's not how you build a strong future.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Taxes and housing costs. Now, on that subject, the Prime Minister created a $4 billion so-called housing accelerator that gave hundreds of millions of dollars to big city politicians across the country. Toronto got the money, and construction went down 20%. Winnipeg got the money, construction went down 15%. Vancouver got the money, construction went down 19%. Ottawa got the money, construction went down 10%. Mr. Speaker, when I was the housing minister, we built 194,000 homes. Why won't he follow my common sense example?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
The member opposite was Stephen Harper's failed housing minister. He built 6 affordable housing units across the country. So we'll take no lessons from them on housing. They would rather pick fights rather than invest in the kinds of changes that are improving density and zoning, using public lands, accelerating red tape so that people can get more affordable housing built quicker right across the country. It takes actions and investments to build up this country. That's exactly what we're doing in responsible ways. All he's offering is fights with the provinces and municipalities and cuts to services Canadians rely on.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, he just accidentally told the truth. He said he's accelerating red tape. Well, he sure is doing that, but he's not accelerating his math lessons. He's always admitted that he's been bad with numbers. I have the documents from Stats Canada's website. That's part of his government that shows that in 2015, there were 461,000 housing completions, and the average rent was only $973 for a one-bedroom, half of what it is today. Given that I delivered so many affordable homes, why won't the Prime Minister follow my common sense plan to build the homes, not the bureaucracy?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, it says something about the level of confidence the previous Prime Minister had in that member when Stephen Harper used to say the federal government has no responsibility around housing and then asks him to be their housing minister. That's perhaps why he delivered only 6 affordable homes over the course of their years in government. The reality is, Mr. Speaker, we have stepped up to invest in densification, in cutting red tape, in creating more housing starts right across the country, working with municipalities and provinces to solve this housing crisis, while all he offers is cuts and breaks to wealthy landlords.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, it is this Liberal Prime Minister that said a year ago that the federal government has no responsibility for housing.
Right.
Of course, he said that after he had completed the doubling of housing costs. And then, speaking of housing ministers, he went on to point the guy who had lost track of 1 million people coming into the country, who had allowed a 300% increase in population growth against the warnings about housing from his own department. Tomorrow, the Prime Minister plans to reverse and swallow himself whole on immigration. Will he complete the job by firing his housing minister?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we've continued to step up and invest in housing by working with provinces and municipalities right across the country, because of course we know that actions of previous governments of Conservative and Liberal stripes underinvested for many years in housing, which is why we're in the situation we're in, a situation not dissimilar to many advanced democracies around the world. That is exactly why we've stepped up to put money on the table for municipalities as they change their densification rules and zoning laws to accelerate the process of building housing and continue to solve this housing crisis that Canadians are facing from coast to coast to coast.
The Prime Minister is admitting that his immigration policies have been totally incompetent. In fact, the ratio of new people to new homes reached its highest level in recorded history last year after his then immigration minister, now housing minister, ignored the warnings of his own department. According to a new Concordia University report, the rent is expected to rise to $7,500 in Vancouver and $5,500 in Toronto if the trajectory continues. Will he reverse course now?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, one of the great advantages of Canada in the world, and of Canadians in the world, is that we continue to be a country that understands that immigration is a source of opportunity and growth and richness for this country. One of the other great advantages we have is we have an immigration system that is able to adjust to different realities. In the years after the pandemic, there was a need for more temporary workers, there was a desire for more international students, and we let more in, working with the provinces and businesses across the country. As we see the situation shift, as the labor market shifts, we're making changes to the immigration system so that we can keep its support.
That's right.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, there's nothing compassionate about inviting people without a place for them to live or health care for them to have or jobs that provide them with paychecks. He has destroyed our immigration system through his own personal incompetence and destroyed a 150-year common sense consensus between Liberals and Conservatives on that subject. He cannot fix what he broke on immigration, housing, or anything else because he's busy fighting his own caucus. Why won't he call a carbon tax election so that we can restore Canada's promise, where anyone who comes here and works hard can have a good life, a safe street, and a warm home?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the work we are focused on is on the middle class and people working hard to join it, and we have delivered over these past years. And in these times of global strife and pressures, that is exactly what we are doubling down on investing in building homes, investing in strengthening our immigration system so that it can match the challenges we're in right now, in moving forward on putting more money in people's pockets, even as we create strong jobs and growth for the future. The Bank of Canada just really reduced interest rates because inflation is now down to low inflation once again. We are managing this country responsibly. We're continuing to invest in its future.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, Canada makes every single one of us a promise. If you work hard, you get a good life. That promise, like everything else after 9 years of this NDP Liberal Prime Minister, is broken. Now, he's broken countless promises, but this one is different. This wasn't his promise to break. It belonged to all of us. Now that he has destroyed the immigration, the housing market, the cost of living, will he call a carbon tax election so that we can bring home Canada's promise?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Once again, Mr. Speaker, we see the Leader of the Opposition pushing a brokenist vision of Canada that is simply not aligned with the reality. Yes, Canadians are struggling like people are all around the world after years of high inflation and disrupted supply chains and global conflicts has weighed heavily on everyone around the world. But Canadians continue to see opportunities. Canadians continue to see investments by a government that believes in them, whether it's investing in green jobs of the future or investing in programs and supports like dental and childcare that make a difference that the Conservatives continue to vote against.
That's right.
The Honourable Member for Burnaby South. Or do we have? You have any no? Je m'excuse. I apologize to the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, brokenist. It's not even a word. He's even breaking the English language. Oh my goodness. So he broke the housing market by doubling the costs. He broke the cost of food by jacking up the carbon tax and increasing prices 36% faster than in the United States. He's broken our immigration system. He's breaking the bank with his doubling of the debt. Even his own caucus members think that everything is broken. Why don't we have a carbon tax election to decide?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
While the Leader of the Opposition is focused on exploiting the struggles of Canadians that are very real, he's not offering a single solution to support them. He's offering to take away the Canada carbon rebate that is putting more money in their pockets and fighting climate change successfully while it grows the economy. He's offering to cancel the dental care program that has helped close to 1 million Canadians already access dental care. He's planning on canceling the child care that has brought child care costs down to $10 a day in so many parts of the country and created spaces everywhere. He stands against the programs and supports for Canadians, while at the same time he says Canada's broken.
That's right.
Canada had to issue an emergency rate cut to salvage a collapsing economy, an economy that has fallen more in the last 5 years than any other G7 country. Our GDP per capita is smaller today than it was a decade ago, while the American has grown by 18%. The gap between the Canada and U.S. per person GDP is now at its worst in a century, leading to homelessness, helplessness, and hunger on the streets. Why won't the Prime Minister call a carbon tax election so that we can fix the economy he broke?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Every now and then, Mr. Speaker, despite all his efforts, we see a little edge of the tinfoil hat peeking out once again from the Leader of the Opposition as he continues his attacks on the Bank of Canada, on the independence of our financial institutions. The reality is, Mr. Speaker, we have worked hard as a government to bring down inflation so that the Bank of Canada can bring down interest rates faster than just about any other country of our peer countries around the world, because we know that bringing down interest rates is what's going to help Canadians, even as we continue to invest in programs like dental and pharmacare and childcare that the Conservatives are voting against and delivering for Canadians.
Position.
After 9 years, this NDP Liberal Prime Minister is not worth the human misery that Canadians are suffering. There are now 1,400 homeless encampments in Ontario alone. The City of Toronto admits that it's run out of homeless shelter space and will have to turn people out into the snow throughout the forthcoming winter. There's a Facebook group called the Dumpster Diving Network, and people are lined up in the rain for hours for rotten potatoes. Is this the Great Depression?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we've all seen the cozy relationship that the Leader of the Opposition has with a number of Conservative premiers across the country. I would ask him to use his significant influence over those Conservative premiers to ask them to accept the money that the federal government is putting on the table to help with homeless encampments. A month ago, we asked each province and territory to partner with us to help find shelter for those living in encampments. Alberta, Ontario, and Saskatchewan have not yet formally responded to us to end encampments in their respective jurisdictions. I ask the Leader of the Opposition if he cares about this indeed, to stop playing politics and start up.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
The problem with that blame game is that, in fact, the worst homeless encampments are in NDP-governed British Columbia. In fact, what the Prime Minister has done is take the radical socialist policies that led to those encampments and those massive overdose crises nationwide. Take, for example, the drug dens. The Prime Minister continues to push taxpayer-funded opioids on the population, which has led to 47,000 overdose deaths, more than died in the Second World War as Canadians. Will he reverse these policies?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
I just have to pause for a moment on the incredible irony of watching the Leader of the Opposition in this House accuse anyone of playing the blame game. He has made his entire career as leader and 20 years as a parliamentarian about playing the blame game. It's about time he started taking responsibility for the members of his caucus and take responsibility for putting forward solutions that will actually help Canadians instead of offering cuts and pointing fingers and empty slogans.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
The NDP Liberal government is acting like, quote, a drug lord. Those are the words of Masha Krupp, a mother who lost her daughter to an overdose. That daughter, Larissa, was given taxpayer-funded opioids. Now her son is addicted to the same government-provided drugs. This radical policy, which this Prime Minister pioneered and expanded with the help of the NDP, has taken thousands of lives. Will he stop acting like, quote, a drug lord and put the money into treatment and recovery?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we're using all the tools at our disposal to save lives and keep communities safe for everyone. Meanwhile, Conservatives are choosing to use struggling people as political props to promote fear and spread misinformation. From the very beginning, we've been there to work on an evidence-based, compassionate and public safety approach. We have and always will be there to work with provinces and territories on approaches focused on saving lives and ending this crisis.
For 9 years, this NDP Liberal Prime Minister is not worth the cost, crime, or corruption. We now know that his deficit this year will be $7 billion, or 20% bigger than his finance minister claimed in the budget only 6 months ago. Where's the money going? Well, we know that $400 million was directed by Liberal appointees to their own companies in what involved 186 conflicts of interest. Now the Prime Minister has paralyzed Parliament for 2 weeks to cover it up and deny police the evidence. Will he hand it over to the cops so that we can put the bad guys in jail and get our money back?
Before I invite the Right Honourable Prime Minister to respond, I'm going to ask the Honourable Member from Timmins James Bay to please not take the floor unless recognized by the Speaker. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we just heard very impassioned and understandable outbursts from the member for Welton and Halton Hills, who is concerned about foreign interference and the impact. What is something that worries me is that he can't have confidence that his leader, the leader of the Conservative Party, is actually going to do the work to take foreign interference seriously and get the security clearance necessary to be able to protect the members of his caucus from foreign interference. Why is the leader of the Conservative Party not getting a security clearance?
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Because this Prime Minister will not gag me the way he's gagging his 24... He's turned our country into a playground for foreign interference. He's unleashed crime, chaos on our streets, and corruption inside our government. My question, which he's erratically trying to avoid, is why does he keep covering up the criminal evidence in a $400 million green slush fund scandal? Why?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition is about to get up one more time in this House to say some words. I recommend that at this point he choose those words to apply to explaining to Canadians why he will not get the necessary security clearance from our national intelligence agencies to be able to protect not just his party and their institutions and their members, but all Canadians. Any leader who wants to take national security seriously should be able to listen to the information that CSIS wants to share them instead of covering his ears and going la 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 like